Support for Butter City is provided by
Today we're talking about film festival.
That adds color to the story.
Roll sound. Cameras rolling.
Welcome to this episode of Butter City, the show all about filmmaking with a little bit of a Minnesota twist. And I'm super excited because we have John Akre in the studio today. Thanks for coming, John.
Oh, thanks so much for that. It's like a great honor to be here. It's really cool.
You are, you're an awesome animator. For folks that haven't had a chance to see any of your work, one of the things I wanted to ask you was you use animation. We'll be able to see a few of your clips today, but you also have like some pretty big ideas about media and what media is. Can you tell me a little bit about like what you think media means to community and to your work?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's to actually see something on a screen, kind of validates it in a way that's very, it's there's life, there's what we live when we're people and out in the world and all that. And that's kind of our experience of reality. We look around and we see things and we frame things and we do our cutting on our own, and then suddenly we see things on the screen. We go to a movie theater, which is like this incredible experience. You're there, you're completely overwhelmed by the image on the screen, or you watch television, completely overwhelms you. Even though there's things going on in your room, you still kind of focus on that screen. And there's something about that experience, that being drawn to that screen, that kind of, it changes your mind, really. It just affects your mind and kind of, it embeds this picture of what the world is like. You're out in the world, you see things, you experience it, but then you see it on the screen, and in some way, that world that you experience yourself out in the real world, maybe it's a little less valid because there's that world you see on the screen, that there's something about it that's it's maybe a little more powerful than that real world. So, that's why I think I felt that maybe a little bit when I was a little kid. I saw things on TV all the time. I went to movies. I knew the power of that. And I think I felt at an early age a need to kind of talk back, to kind of use the screen too, and to say a few things, or to maybe to try to put some of the stuff that I saw in that real world, that so-called real world that I saw, to put up on the screen. And so I think it's always that kind of, I've always kind of wanted to have a dialogue with the screens myself, and also kind of working with young people too. Because they're trying to figure out what their ideas are, and they're heavily influenced by the screens, and of course that's a very limited view of the world, and there's their own experiences, and there's that whole kind of weirdness that happens because your experiences aren't maybe what you see on the screen. So them to be able to have some dialogue, by being able to make things and put them on the screen and get their experiences validated that way is something that's also been pretty important to me too. So.
When, I know this much about animation, I love to watch it, but I don't know a lot about it. And so some of the folks that are going to be watching this are going to not even know what qualifies as animation. So can you describe a little bit about what animation is? Yeah,
well, animation basically is the word animation means making things come alive, It's taking stuff that's static, you can draw a picture, you can start out with clay, you can cut things out of magazines, you can use little models and things, and or on a computer, you can create things completely in a computer, and then you use the basic intrinsic nature of movies, which is that when you watch a movie, you're not watching a picture that's moving, you're watching a bunch of still pictures projected back very rapidly to give you the illusion of movement. So with animation, you're making lots of still images, basically, and when they get played back, it gives you the illusion that thing you created, that thing you made, or that thing you took from the real world and you moved around bit by bit, that it actually has some life to it, that it's coming to life. And that's basically kind of what it is.
Do you think animation, because you touched on a little bit like this idea of kind of being media literate, being aware that you're watching something that's very constructed, and that there's oftentimes, hopefully, if somebody is paying attention to the work they're doing, there's a real deliberate intention behind what's being put on a screen. Do you think the way you use animation to sometimes critique that is a really good like genre because it's so literally it's so much more obvious. Like to a kid, it's not necessarily as obvious, but to an adult, or as you start to realize it, like something's moved this object in between frames. Do you think that helps get at what you're oftentimes the commentary you're trying to make?
Yeah, I've never really thought about it necessarily that way. That's a really interesting way to think about it. I think animation itself is, it takes a lot of participation by the audience, because you have to accept that drawing is actually moving and maybe alive, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, But the thing about animation, and maybe why I like to use it for my ideas more, is that you can really, if you have an idea, you can make something out of it. You don't have to build a set. You don't have to have actors act exactly how you want them to act, to get that idea across. You don't have to, have total control of the soundscape of what's going on. You don't have to do all those things when you're shooting reality. You can draw, you can cut out stuff, you can go on a computer and put things together, and you can make that, that world kind of whatever you want to do. So, yeah.
No, it's really cool, and I want to give folks a chance to take a look at one of your films. So we're going to watch one of your shorts called Wargoon Flishe.
Yeah.
In 2007, you made this, right?
Yeah, so basically this is really one of the first things, I when I was a kid, I did a lot of animation. I stopped when I became in high school because it wasn't cool, and then I kind of started again. I realized after like 20 years of making documentary kinds of stuff that I really wanted to make animation, and so I started doing just little things. And Wargoon Flishe is actually a feature. It's over an hour long. And I was just talking with a friend, and I just blurted out, I'm going to make a feature, animated feature. And that was like the first time I even thought about the concept. And so Wargoon Flishe is. It was like very early. I was just trying to figure out what I was even doing with Wargoon Flishe, and it's kind of a statement about media and about how media and the commercial industry. Now, maybe not in this version, they work hand in hand. It's the same company that's making guns and then showing you how to use them on the screen. But it's a political satire and very kind of crude animation. But that's what it is, I guess.
Awesome. Let's take a look at that.
Okay.
It's a big night. Say it proudly. The cars pull up in all their crashes, big dresses and with ties step out and walk the carpeting with each step the loudest hush. And there's a new name in the air, and it's a big name like he's a giant, and all the eyes wait for him to leave his limousine, and some might see him, and some might just think so. There he is, the hero of it all, the hero of our story, Wargoon Flishe, like a flagpole with 2 feet. Then he moves to run towards you with guns blazing. He shoots and kills many people in the movie. It's a flash of bright light, and then it's surrender, and then you hear no more, and then there are others. It's guns a-blazing, and it's shoot me in the keister, and it's 21 gun galoot, and it's bang bang me on a new one, and it's so many more movies, and Hardly Heavers has the scripts. He has a team to write them fast, and if Boom has a new gun, they will feature it in a movie, and if the sales are lagging for another model, they will put it into Wargoon's hands, and he will test it against the villains, and if there aren't enough people to shoot, then there's the scene where he shoots a target dead, and the movie even shows you where you can buy your own, and the money pours in, and the multitude pays and pays, and the giant boom light flashes like it's winking. And botulism certainly had eyes for such numbers, but Wargoon Flishe feels so suddenly empty, like the train has left the station and its steam still slowly misting, but he's standing there with his suitcase.
So John, one of the things I really like is it's a good story, it's good animation, but also it's like as you're doing it, you're providing an audience with some kind of media literacy again, about like you're critiquing at the same time as you're telling the story about this idea of like, pay attention to what stories are being told and pay attention to like what might be motivating that story and how that affects our community. Have you gotten feedback from folks when you show this? Do they have a reaction to it where they're thinking about things maybe a little bit differently?
Yeah, because my stuff is somewhat political. the reactions that I get are pretty much either people really hate it because they don't agree with the politics, or they like it, they appreciate it because of the politics. Wargoon Flishe is really, it's about like what we were talking about earlier. It's about the power of the media, and it's about the CEO of a corporation that sells guns and makes media products, that makes movies. And so they try to sell more guns by doing what the movies do, and they basically, by showing that guns are a part of normal life, and a great way to, if you have a conflict, a great way to deal with that conflict is by shooting your gun. And that's what the movies, so many of the mainstream movies tell us, really, they build that ideology, that idea in our head, and it, that drives up sales for all the great gun companies. And my connection doesn't really exist, that necessarily, although it may, I don't know, that gun companies and media companies are run by the same single person, but there definitely are kind of connections like that. And so when you go out there and actually give a political point of view like that, there's definitely, how people respond to my work has a lot more to do with their politics sometimes than their ability to get into it. Really, what I try to do is try to add to that with some kind of emotional content, which is really hard to do with animation too. You have to really get the audience, the trust of an audience member to really accept that the emotions that your character has are real.
How do you do that? Are there little tricks? Do you know if you do this type of entrance of a character that you're going to be more likely to get an audience to accept them?
Yeah, well, it's what like all the Disney animators said, that that basically to be an animator you have to be an actor, because you have to act out the character yourself. Disney animators actually had little mirrors in front of their drawing board, so they could do different facial expressions and then copy them. I don't do that, but every time I do make a character, I do it on my face while I'm drawing, or when I'm shaping clay. I've been doing a lot of stuff with clay lately. I act it out first to get the feeling and try to put it in the character, and so part of it is trying to just visually kind of create the emotion, and part of it is storytelling, which is really what it all comes down to. Is trying to put element A next to element B and trying to build it so you get a story that hopefully somehow engages people to want to keep on paying attention to and get involved in.
So I know that you run a animation film fest here, a group that gets together and shows animations, and you work with a lot of other animators in town. How rich do you feel like this community is for animation and for sort of that short film genre?
Yeah, last year I organized a kind of a small animation festival, because there is none in the Twin Cities, and I called it Minanimate, and yeah, we had a screening at the Ritz, and I'm trying to coordinate a Facebook group and try. The one thing about animators is that, or at least people like me, some animators, and maybe it's a stereotype, but it does take a lot of work to do this stuff. So you're going out and doing things socially, maybe doesn't happen as much. So trying to build an animation community is something that maybe is a little hard, but there is a lot going on. There's a lot of people doing work. MCAT has an incredible animation program. I do animation camps and work with young people doing animation. There's a lot of very young people, boys and girls, lots of girls too, who are really interested in animation, very talented, So I think, that's, what you do here with Butter City, what IFP does. There's these organizations and these things that help to build those communities. And I think it's just kind of starting with animation, and I just want to be a part, of some kind of community of animators. So I'm trying to make some of those connections. And I met some great people through doing the Minanimate, and hopefully just want to keep on growing it. Do a festival of some kind every year, and minanimate.com, you can go onto it, find out more, join the Facebook group.
Well, that's one of the things that I've really appreciated about your work, whether it's in the animation field or in the documentary style work you do, is you're very engaging, and you're always trying to bring people together, and you're always trying to build people's skills to either produce it or to have literacy. And I think I appreciate it, because it really helps our community. And I also know, given on that social kind of awareness level, that you have an interest also in the environment, and specifically in our dependency on cars. And so you do pieces that are often around biking or walking, or just thinking about what is the car in our society, and what relation do you have to this idea about cars and bikes? And
well, when I was pretty young, and I was probably 12 or 13 or so, and it had been building, but by the time I was 12 or 13, I just made a decision: I'm not going to ever drive. I don't want to drive. I don't want to be a part of that. Part of it was just kind of seeing, being, when you're a kid and you're a pedestrian, cars are huge and they make things very dangerous, and it just the world's, it just seemed to me like, why do we do this? Why do we have these huge cars? Why can't we build communities where we can walk and bike and get around in that kind of way? Why do we have to, one thing, when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I did the math, you compare your weight to the weight of a car. Every time you go in a car, 90% of the energy goes to moving the car, not you. I mean, to me, when I was that age, it was like, that is so stupid. How can people keep on doing that? So I basically decided not to drive, and what I want to live in a world where I can be equal to people who drive. I want a world where I can, if someone can drive from my house to uptown in 10 minutes, and it takes me an hour to get there on the bus, I just want to be equal in that world. So part of what I'm involved with my neighborhood group because I want to build bike and walking infrastructure in it, better transit. I mean, I do a lot of the filmmaking stuff I do because I want to just kind of maybe try to get that point of view out a little bit more. I mean, it's starting to get out there more and more and more, but it's just taking a while. So when I was going to do my next animated feature, should I go ahead and talk about that?
Walker and Driver,
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of based on that whole idea, and I've had a couple of screenings of it, and it's like the audience responses. I think it kind of touches a nerve that maybe people aren't ready for because it's a satire about car culture and that craziness that I kind of see. It's about a race car driver who decides to become a pedestrian and kind of the social, just kind of the social shunning he gets because of that. So
awesome. Let's watch this trailer.
Okay.
Last night I felt so free, my heart was leaping.
And now that the race is on, it's high time for some advertising.
We are fighting hard to get back our cars. We don't have them yet, but we will.
And let me remind you that this is Super Livius from my dashboard to yours.
I keep hearing your steps in the rain that is falling.
John, watching this and listening to you earlier when you were talking about this, I want to get into some of the detail that went into making this because it took you 5 years to make this piece. But before that, you said something that was really interesting about this idea that like when you were 13, you were doing math about the logic around cars, and there's something kind of amazing about kids, and I know you work with youth, and so you know this, that like kids have a way of seeing the world sometimes that's just, they're not attached to things the same way we are. We've already become attached to things. And I'm wondering, is filmmaking for you in a way sometimes like just trying to hang on to some truth you knew when you were younger, but you're trying to keep that truth alive in you as you kind of go throughout life? Yeah.
I mean, that's great because when I started making movies when I was like 9 or 10 years old. So it was Super 8mm film kind of stuff. And after doing it for a while, doing the documentary kinds of stuff, I realized, I want to go back to that stuff I was doing earlier because there was something very different about it. Something, my own naivety, my being a kid and not really seeing the rest of the world, something I want to get back. And I started working with young people too, and kind of, knowing that they're not, the ideology of the world around us hasn't quite concreted itself into their heads like it has when you're a certain age. So at a certain point, maybe 10 years ago, what I wanted to do with my work is I wanted to get back to that kind of that whole child mind a little bit, and I think animation is a great way to do that because it is so associated with childhood and with kind of that, simple. I don't know if it's even simple. It's probably more complicated than adult minds are, child minds, because they're really trying to make sense of the whole world and trying to look at it in unique ways, without the ideologies all around us that kind of limit our way of seeing things or put boxes around stuff. So So what I want my work as much as possible to do is try to get back into that child way of thinking. And so that's one thing I always try to keep in mind when I do my animated pieces.
That's really cool. And I know with this piece, like even though you had said earlier that animators tend to work by themselves, this piece had some collaboration that had to happen.
Yeah.
Who helped you with this piece?
Yeah, well, my girlfriend, Beth Peloff, who's also an animator, she also writes songs, and so she wrote, it's like a musical. It's like, one thing I wanted to do with this is make it somewhat of a Disney movie, you know, where you have the beautiful, colorful animation. Mine isn't done as smoothly as Disney by any means, but then you go to these song numbers all through it. And so Beth wrote these great songs, these 5 great songs, and performed them, and they're kind of musical numbers that kind of illustrate the story. You know, she helps me a lot in kind of talking out stories. You know, you kind of talk it out. You know, why does this character do this? How do you get from this to this? And she gave me a lot of insights. And she also, I show everything to her and, you know, get her feedback on it too. You know, so I think even though I work alone, basically, I mean, it is collaborative. You know, I always like to show things to someone, and maybe I don't take their feedback, and I, you know, kind of go with my own thing. But even just showing something to someone else and kind of being in the room with them as they're watching it, you know, tells you a lot about what you did and how to change it. So
that's cool. I wanted to take a moment too and just kind of show some of the other projects that you've worked on. So let's take a look at those.
Okay.
To all the wheel rims of the north where many ice bikes tally forth, there was a rider pure to none. He rode the 12-day ice bike run, velocipede Stanley Ray. He kept the cold seat day by day until it all changed overnight. He lost the race but saw the light.
We cannot understand why they wish to disturb our peaceful ways. Is it because they look upon our graceful leaps with envy, while they must grovel in the muck created by their smelly war machines?
The crisp air of our collective voice kept us refreshed and invigorated. The strong light of Emerson's words carried us aloft.
Nature is a rag merchant who works up every...
And then, with the turn of a page, came a horror that none of us expected. Something so foul as to beggar all description.
The snot monster.
We'll never get past it.
How frighteningly grotesque.
The street was too dangerous for children, too dangerous for anyone, until he came to town. The man with no car.
John, you know, some of the stuff, it's like you're describing how your animation changes, and but then you're also, I mean, I couldn't help but like when you made the comment while we were watching this that it's about, one of these is about wanting to have a bowl of soup with your shadow. Like that's deep stuff. But you really, it's like you get a chance to lighten it up because it is like, it's animation, and people often, unless it's a certain animator that deliberately has created a perception that they're doing something different than that, people come to animation with a lighter heart in some ways.
No, there is the tradition about animation kind of taking on big issues, but doing it in a way that's maybe a little bit more accessible than like the heavy issue motion picture, kind of thing. So so that's something that I love animation history, so I like try to watch as many animated films from the past, and they inspire me, and so everything I do is kind of touched by all that inspiration, that 100+ years of animation that's happened.
And a couple of these pieces you made for MinKino. What's MinKino?
Yeah, so now it's an every 2 month thing. It's a group of people who get together every month. It's called a mystery meet. It's a subject. You have like 2 months to make a film, a short film that has something to do with that subject. Then we come back, 2 months later, we show our films, we figure out the mystery meet for the next one. And so it's just it's a kind of a social thing. You have a task to do. You have like this limitation that you have to make a project and do it on that. You have to do it quickly. It used to be every month, now it's every 2 months. And you can find out more by going to minkino.com. It's just a really fun thing.
So anybody that wants to get involved with it can just show up, learn what they're going to do over the next 2 months and give it a shot.
Go to Facebook, find out what the mystery meet is, come to the screening, and then.
It's something I really appreciate, because sometimes filmmakers, for whatever reasons, are less want to be less accessible because people are always pitching stories to them, and you seem to thrive off of the engagement. Like you thrive off of seeing other people's work and engaging new people, and that's exciting.
It's all about getting ideas and getting inspired and also then you have part of making work and showing it and doing that talking is actually listening to other people. Just like a healthy conversation is not you just talking, but you're actually listening to other folks. So that's what I love about it too. Just seeing all the great work that's being done by folks here, and
That's cool. So if folks wanted to see a lot more of your animation, how would they go about doing it?
Yeah, well, my website is sloppyfilms.net or johnakre.com. They basically go to the same thing. And also, if you want to find out more about MinAnimate, it's just minanimate.com. And so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then do you have any goal or anything that's on the horizon for you as far as your next animation or what you're trying to do maybe?
Of course I'm working on another feature. So I have an animated feature that I just started on I started writing the script last year, but it's I don't know if you know the Gateway District. It's a part of Minneapolis that in the original historic center of the city demolished completely in the 50s and the 60s. So I am telling a story about the Gateway District as it's being demolished and kind of recreating it by drawing all the buildings too. So
that's cool.
So yeah. So
are you gonna project it in the area?
I don't know. That's a really good idea. I never even thought about that.
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. Thank you so much for being on the show. I think you're awesome and you rock.
So do you. Thanks so much for doing this. This is so important what you do. Just kind of getting the word out about local filmmaking.
It's a lot of fun, and you've done so much work, and I'm really glad we got to have you on the show. And I wanted to thank everybody who came, showed up, sat in your living room in front of your computer and watched this episode of Butter City. Check out John Akre's stuff because it's awesome. And thanks for watching this episode of Butter City.
Support for Butter City is provided by